I'm Sandy and this is Pickle, and we're here at the new location of Tabby Tree Fiber Arts. In my last video I showed you how to dress the loom, and today we're going to continue from there and get you started with weaving. So one of the first things that we need to do in order to get started is understand the tie-up. This is the part of a weaving draft that tells you which shafts are attached to which treadles. And by the way, this book is The Hand Weaver's Pattern Directory by Ann Dixon. Wonderful book for 4-shaft weaving. So in this box here, this is called the tie-up. This represents a treadle. The treadles are the petals at the bottom of the loom. So this column here represents one treadle. This column represents the next, the third one, and the fourth one. And then here, the rows represent the shafts. So this represents shaft 1, shaft 2, shaft 3, and shaft 4. So what this is telling me is that on my first treadle, I need to attach shafts 1 and 2. On my second treadle, I'm going to attach shafts 2 and 3, and then 3 and 4, and then 1 and 4. So now we're going to go under the loom, and I'm going to show you how that's done. Now, we're going to need 4 treadles down here as the draft showed us. We can use any of these treadles that we want to. You should choose what's comfortable for you. I'm going to make this my first treadle. Do you agree, Pickle? So I'm going to make this one my first treadle. This will be my second. This is my third and my fourth. But I could just as well make this my first treadle, this my second treadle, and so on. You choose which is which. I prefer to keep them in order the same way they are in the draft. So here's my first treadle, and the draft tells me that on the first treadle I need to attach shafts 1 and 2. So I'm going to find the cords that are directly above this treadle, and here is the one right here that is attached to shaft 1. So I'm going to use these cords. Each shaft has a cord, and my draft tells me that on the first treadle I need to attach shafts 1 and 2. So I'm going to find the cord that's attached to shaft 1. This is it, and I'm going to attach it here. And then I'm going to find the cord attached to shaft 2, that's this one, and I'm going to attach that there. So now when I press treadle 1, shafts 1 and 2 will be raised. My next treadle needs shafts 2 and 3 attached. The next one needs shafts 3 and 4 attached. And the last one needs shafts 1 and 4 attached. Sorry, they got tangled. 1 and 4. So what I've just done here is a tie-up for what's called a 2-2 twill. And I also want a plain weave tie-up. So I'm going to pick 2 more treadles where I'm going to attach shafts 1 and 3. 1 and 3. And I'm leaving a treadle in between just to provide some separation between the two so I don't get them mixed up. And the other one is shafts 2 and 4. And this is how I get plain weave, or it's also called tabby. And basically that's lifting every other thread. So I've got 2-2 twill here, and this helps me weave tabby. And now we're going to go back up to the top of the loom. So now I'm going to double check the work that I did in tying up the shafts. So if I press my first treadle, I see shafts 1 and 2 come up, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and 1 and 4. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look through this space here. When I press a treadle and the shafts lift, it creates this space which is called a shed. I'm going to look through the shed and make sure that it's clear and that there are no threads that are droopy or hanging out in the middle. It looks nice and clean to me, so that tells me that I don't have any threading problems. And I'm also double checking my plain weave treadles, that's shafts 1 and 3, and 2 and 4. So I am all set to start spreading my warp. So I've got a bobbin in here. It's not the bobbin that I'm going to be weaving with. I'm going to use this just as some scrap thread to spread my warp. So you put the bobbin in, feeding out from underneath the bobbin through the slot in the side, like that. And you weave with the slot facing towards you. I'm going to spread the warp using my plain weave treadles. So I'm going to rest the shuttle on this part here, which is called the race. And I'm going to throw it through there. Now normally we would beat the weft in at this point, but for spreading the warp, I'm going to do a few picks. Now I've gone to my second tabby treadle, and I'm going back to my first tabby treadle and back to my second one, all without beating. And now I'm going to beat all at once. And you can see how it started to spread out the warp nice and even, but I still have some gaps in there. So I'm just going to repeat that process again. And I'm not worrying about my edges right now. Right now this is all scrap that's going to come out later. So I'm just trying to get the warp nice and spread out. There, that looks good to me. Now, one thing we would want to watch out for here is if I had peaks and valleys in this line here. This line is called the fell line. It's where the warp is becoming cloth. If I had a bump here or a valley, then that tells me a few things. If I had a bump, then that means that I'd have to tighten up those warp threads a little bit. They're too loose in that section. If I had a dip, then that means the warp threads in that section were too tight and I would need to loosen them up. So you want to start with a nice flat fell line. Now, a step I should have taken before I spread the warp, I just forgot to do it, and I forget that part a lot, is to put the floating selvages on. So a floating selvage is something that you're always going to need when you're weaving a twill. And that's because the weft thread is not going all the way to the edge of the cloth as it's being woven. It's not going all the way to the edge every single time. It's often stopping short of the outermost thread. And that creates kind of a jagged edge on your cloth. So we want to put a thread on there that is always going to be there for the weft to go around every single time. And the way we do that, there's two ways. One, when I wound the warp, I could wind in 2 extra threads at that time. And then when I do the threading, they would be wound in with the rest of the warp, but they wouldn't be threaded. I would just let them hang loose until this point. But I didn't do that while I was winding the warp. So now I'm going to add them on separately and weight them off the back of the loom. So I need to get a couple of strands that match the outermost threads on my weaving and have them be roughly the same length as my warp. So here's my first one. I'm going to take a warp weight and I'm just going to wrap it around the body of the weight, leaving about a yard. Then I'm going to take this thread over to the back of the loom and move these heddles over. It's going to go through here, and then I'm going to put it through the outermost slot here next to the warp threads that are already here. So it's going into its own slot in the reed. And then I will just tie it onto the beam here, like that. And then I'm going to take this over to the back of the loom, let out some slack. I'll do a little slip knot, or some people like to just wrap it around the hook, and then I'm just going to let it hang like that. And now I'm going to do another one on the other side. All right. Okay. You might want to get it from over. Okay, so now we're going to wind a bobbin to get ready for weaving. So this is my weft thread. I'm just going to put it in the end of the bobbin before I put it onto the bobbin winder, and that just helps hold it there. When I wind a bobbin, I move the thread with my hand and go all the way from one side of the bobbin back to the other side. I'm going to go back and forth like this until I've built it up as high as I want to go. It just depends on how much yarn you need for what you're doing. But I'm going to fill this bobbin up. I'm going to build it up on the sides before I start really filling in the middle. Okay, now that it's built up on the sides, then I'm just not going to go as far each time. I'm not going all the way to the edge anymore. There, and now I filled up that bobbin. So you may notice that the edges of these don't want, like this one wants to curl up like this, and it can be a little annoying, and it can make it a little hard to get a good selvage. The edges of the cloth are called the selvage. It can make it hard to get a good selvage. So what I often do is go ahead and advance the warp forward. Let me get these out of the way so they're not causing tension issues with my warp. Okay. I'm going to wind it until this is actually going around the edge here. And I've tightened it so it's kind of, it's not extremely tight, but it is nice and firm. And now you can see, now that it started going around the breast beam, these edges are no longer curled up. I'm going to put in a couple more picks of the scrap yarn, mostly because now I need to get my floating selvages going in here. So when you've got floating selvages on, you want to take the shuttle above the floating selvage when you go in to the shed, and you want it to go under the floating selvage as you come out. And I'm not going to beat this all the way down. I'm just going to let it stay right there. I'm going over the floating selvage and under the floating selvage. And every time I put one pick of weft thread in there, I want to leave it at an angle. This is because when I beat this in, the weft is going to be going under and over and under and over the warp threads. So we want to leave a little bit of slack. If we don't, then our selvages are going to start drawing in. Okay, I'm just going to do a couple more picks with the scrap thread, so I'm establishing a nice base here. Okay. Okay. All right, now I can trim this off, and I'm ready to start weaving with my actual weft thread. So here's my weft thread. I'm going to put that on the spindle here, and then through the slot. And I am planning to do hem stitching along the edge of this, and I'm right-handed, so I want to put this weft in, and then I'm going to leave a tail out the side that's at least 3 or 4 times as wide as what I'm weaving. And I'm just going to let that hang there for now, and after I do a few more picks with my weft, then I'm going to use this to stitch along the edge of my weaving. Notice that when I beat, I am holding the beater in the center, not on either side. If you hold it on either side, you may end up with a slanted fell line here, which we definitely don't want. And I'm also not spending a lot of time fiddling with my thread on the edges. I'm just letting it snuggle up to the edge without touching it, and then beating it in. Every time going over the floating selvage, then under the floating selvage. Over and under. Okay. Now I've got enough here that I can do my hem stitching. So I'll put my shuttle aside, and I need to get a tapestry needle. Okay, so now I'm ready to do my hem stitching. I'm going to thread that on here onto a tapestry needle. You don't want to use a very pointy needle because it might split the threads. And now I want to decide how many warp threads I want in each hem stitched bundle. We're going to be creating bundles. I'm going to do 4 in each bundle. So I'm going to take the needle, I'm going to go under 4 warp threads. Then I'm going to go back around, all the way around it. And then I'm going to come up between the same 2 warp threads, but up 3 wefts. And then I can pull that tight. And I've got my first bundle. So now I'll take my needle and I will go under 4 more warp threads. I'm going to go back to that space that I was just in, and I'm going to angle the needle upwards, up between the same 2 warp threads, but up 3 wefts, and pull it tight. So I'm going to just continue this process, pick up 4 warp threads, go back around those 4 warp threads, and then come back up between the same warp threads as this thread is here, and pull it tight. And all the way to the end here, and I've got 5 threads left. That's okay. It's not gonna make any visible difference. So I'm going to go under those last 5 threads, back around them, and then right here before I close up this loop, I'll put the needle through there, and that will help hold it tight. Later on, when this is off the loom, I'm going to twist this fringe, and so I'm just going to let this thread hang here, and later it will be twisted in with the fringe, and it won't be visible at all because it's a matching thread. If it wasn't matching, then later I would just go and weave it back in here with the tapestry needle to hide it and then trim it off. I wanted to mention that at this point, it's really a good idea to look closely at your cloth and see if any of the warp threads are not alternating with the weft. In other words, this is a plain weave or tabby, and the weft is going under, over every single warp thread. If I had 2 warp threads that were together, for instance, I would know I had a threading mistake, and now is the time to undo the bundles and go back and fix that mistake. But I don't have any mistakes, so I'm going to keep going. I did tabby here because it's a great edging because it's the most stable weave. But now I'm going to switch over to my twill treadles. So I'm going to press my twill treadle number 1, and I'm just going to keep on weaving. I'm going to go from treadle 1 to treadle 2 to treadle 3 to treadle 4, and you'll be able to see the pattern start emerging. When I get to 4, I'm going back to 1. Now you can see this distinct diagonal. And that's because I'm treadling 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I reversed direction, I just did treadle number 4, so I'm going to go back to treadle 3, and you will see my twills start to zigzag back in the other direction. And I've made a zigzag. So as I'm weaving, I realized I got distracted a little bit and I made a mistake. And so I want to unweave. So I just, sometimes students have a hard time figuring out, well, where was I? Which treadle was I on? And so you just press the different treadles until the weft wants to come out. When I know I have the right treadle, then it just comes loose. And then I just unweave. So this time I'm going under the floating selvage and over the floating selvage to unweave to the point where my mistake is. And now I know where I was. The last one I did before the mistake was treadle 4, and now I'm just reversing to treadle 3. And I'm back on track. As I'm weaving, the fell line here is getting closer and closer to the beater, and I have a smaller space to put my shuttle in. It's very, very tempting to just keep going as far as you can and squeezing that shuttle in there, but it's going to affect the quality of your selvages. So you need to advance your warp often. On this loom, the way that that's done is by pressing the brake release here, which allows the warp beam back there to turn and let some warp come out towards me. So I press that, and you can see now I've lost tension. And now I'm going to engage this into this cog here, and then just crank it forward like that. I still can advance it more, and I'm going to do that. So I'll press the brake release again until I've got a bit of slack, and then advance it forward and try to get it at the same tension as it was before, and make sure that the beater can reach the fell line. If it can't, if you advanced too much, then what you would need to do is unlock this and let some of the cloth out so the cloth goes back that way, then relock it, and then go to the back of the loom, press the brake release, and wind back onto the warp beam. There. And now I'm ready to keep weaving. So for the purposes of the video, I'm just doing a very small sample. And so I've reached the end of my weaving, and I did another little plain weave border there, just like I did on the front. And now I need to hem stitch on this side. So I'm going to cut that off, leaving a nice tail, and I'll get my my needle. And hem stitching on this side is the same as on the other side, except upside down. Easy, right? So before we were hem stitching and then going up into the cloth. Now we're going to go down into the cloth. So I'm going to pick up 4 weft threads like I did before. I'm going to go back around and then go down 3 weft picks and tighten it up. Again, 4 weft threads, back around and down 3 weft threads. It doesn't have to be 3. It just depends on how you want it to look. You want to have at least 2 though. And I'm just going to do this all the way across. Okay, so I've just finished the hem stitching at the end of my project, but I have so much warp left. If I was really done, then right now I would just take the scissors and I would cut across here, making sure to leave enough for whatever fringe I wanted, and then just take this off the loom. And that's all it is. It's exciting and unceremonious. But if I wanted to keep going, I could do another section, and the way that I start that is just going back to my plain weave treadles, and I'll leave a tail for my hem stitching, and I'm just going to beat that to where I want to restart my project. And I could put in spacers in here if I wanted to, like wooden sticks or something like that, but you don't really have to if you do this carefully. And now I can just keep going like that and do a whole other item on here, a series of mug rugs or whatever. A couple other things I wanted to mention. As this cloth goes around the breast beam, eventually it's going to start going around the cloth beam here. When it does that, you want to insert a separator like cardboard or paper or wooden sticks to separate the cloth from these cords, because when it goes around these cords, it's going to pull tightly on the cloth wherever it's going over this, and it's going to affect your tension at the top here. So make sure you put in some kind of separator at least the first time around. And I believe that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. I have a few other videos planned. I'm going to do one about solving problems and fixing mistakes, another one about reading drafts, and then another one about project planning, all of that math that you have to do in order to get a project started from the very beginning. If you have other topics you would like to hear about, or if there's specific problems that you're having that you want me to cover in those videos that I just mentioned, please leave a note in the comments. I really want to hear the feedback from you. And also, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Happy weaving.